Chrissy, this is for you.
It's a chaise lounge. We didn't know if maybe you guys already had one. We have the receipt if you do.
No, we don't have one. Thank you.
There's a joke 5 people will get. Coming up, a couple thoughts on Stranger Things, as well as a bunch of scores from my trips to Syracuse and Rochester last month, and some live reviews as well. Stay tuned. Alright, so, welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. I'm Pat. As I alluded to in that little intro, we're going to be talking about Stranger Things for a couple of minutes, just because I want to. I really enjoyed this last season. I think they did a really good job with a lot of the characters. So, I'm going to blab about that. I'm going to put a timestamp if you want to skip Stranger Things talk. If you don't want to be exposed to spoilers if you haven't watched it yet, you can go ahead and do that. And then the rest of this update, I'm going to be talking about my voyage to the homeland. I went to Syracuse and then Rochester for one night for a couple of great shows. 2 gigs that are... There was one I went to in Raleigh that was the Bay Area Strikes Back tour, which I haven't even really mentioned on any update or anything. That was great. Exodus and Testament. That was my first show back since I saw Sanguishugabog before lockdown. So these 2 shows I went to in upstate New York are like second and third after lockdown being over. So it's kind of a big deal. I'll talk about who played, when I get to it. I also, of course, went on some shopping sprees while I was home. Hit up 3 different record stores. Talk about that, talk about my scores, all that kind of stuff. But first, a little Stranger Things talk. I thought that'd be fun. I know it's not for everybody. I have a lot of friends that are pretty big cinephiles, that are pretty critical of the show, just being sort of a big mishmash, mosaic of influences from the 80s, cinematically and otherwise. There is a lot of very on the nose, sort of like, hey, Rubik's Cube, kids, remember and Dungeons and Dragons, and that kind of remember this goofy fashion? I feel like that was really put out there the first season or 2. It seems like they're not going in as hard on that. I mean, obviously there's all the musical references. Biggest ones in this season, of course, being Kate Bush and Master of Puppets. But it feels like they're not leaning as heavily into that. Maybe that's just me being biased because I like the show. I don't know. At any rate, I thought this season was really good. A lot of people criticized it because of the length of the last 2 episodes. The last episode being 2.5 hours long. It is a big investment. But when you think about it, if it was a 2-part, like, Season 4 Part 1, Season 4 Part 2 kind of scenario, and they were just split into smaller episodes, would that be any different, So anyway, I enjoyed it. There was some parts that felt a little bloated and like they dragged a bit. Most of the outside of Hawkins stuff, the Russia stuff was kind of a lot. The going back and forth didn't feel completely necessary. And a lot of the stuff involving Jonathan and Mike and Eleven and Will all coming back, and that character Argyle, just, I know it's supposed to be like stoner comic relief, like really did not enjoy that character personally. I did, of course, as you may guess, love the character of Eddie. I think Joseph Quinn, the actor's getting a lot of props for how well he executed that character and that guy. And I feel like if you went to high school, at least during a certain time, it's been a long time since I've been in high school. Most of the people that were born the year that I went to high school are in graduate programs or done with them. So just to give you an indicator there, just to date myself. But I think it was always kind of a thing when you had subcultures and different lunch tables and stuff like that in high school, when you had the outcasts and the weirdos. There was often a ringleader and somebody that was kind of into smelling his or her own farts, that was like, hey, everybody, we're the rebellious ones, like, I'm a freak, and he's just kind of the ultimate version of that in the beginning before he progresses as a person. They nailed just the mannerisms of a person like that, like the, ooh, look at my crazy eyes kind of thing. Reminded me of like a John Lydon kind of deal. The actor who played him is British, so... but yeah, he did a great job, actually played guitar for most of the Master of Puppets cover, which I thought was cool, and was a very sympathetic, likable version of an 80s metalhead. They did a great job with it. I think there's been a lot of like Heschersploitation kind of stuff coming out lately, like with that movie Deathgasm a few years ago from, I think that was Australian, might have been New Zealand, I don't remember, and that metal movie that was on Netflix a little while ago, I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. It was actually pretty good. It was a nice coming-of-age story, much like SLC Punk, like a good coming-of-age story, but really didn't nail the nuances of the subculture that well, which is fine. Like, whatever. It's just a vehicle for the characters as people. Who gives a shit, But I think they did kind of knock it out of the park with, like, everything from Eddie Munson's room in his trailer with, like, all the right posters, Creator and Anthrax, his vest and everything. I mean, if I want to be a real, like, weirdo dork obsessive, I could say that the Motorhead patch is from an album from 2002, but I'm not going to do that.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Because I'm a normal person, relatively, and I don't really care. There's also some complaint about how, or criticisms, I guess, of how it took place in this period, like mid-March of '86, and Master of Puppets came out at the beginning of the month, and he wouldn't have time to learn the song. Like, Jesus Christ, get a life, people, please. And then there's also the big gatekeeping discussion that seems to pop up, like, constantly about all types of stuff, where apparently, I don't know, I think this is a non-controversy. I think it's fake news. I think it's a conspiracy that people are actually trying to gatekeep Master of Puppets. Like, Master of Puppets shirts have been sold at Walmart for, like, 20 years. If that's true, like, what the hell are you talking about? It's the biggest metal band on the planet. It doesn't... Weird. The guys in the band seem to really like it. They did a TikTok where they played along with him, along with the scene. They're all wearing Hellfire Club shirts. I thought it was really great. Also, big commentary throwing the Satanic Panic thing into it. I mean, people kind of laugh about it now, and I don't think younger people really understand. I experienced a little bit of the blowback from that whole era, even in the early 90s when I was a kid. But, I mean, it was a thing where if you were into D&D, if you were a metalhead, granted, bands like Slayer didn't help, but where they assumed you were a cult member. Ask the kids from the Paradise Lost documentary. A quick editor's bay note here. I might have actually read this somewhere and subconsciously just filed it away and forgot about it, but it makes sense. Apparently, the character of Eddie Munson was based on Damien Eccles from the West Memphis 3, so no coincidence there. I mean, it was a real thing that affected people. All these accusations of satanic ritual abuse and stuff. The blowback I experienced was maybe some light bullying, but it definitely affected a lot of people at the time. This complete bullshit about kids that were into this stuff actually being in cults and killing children and shit. So they presented that really well, and they did a good job with that character, and I thought that was great. I'm looking forward. I was sad to see the guy go, but I knew I really liked the character. It was going to be like the Barb of this season. Of course, he was going to be a sacrificial lamb. Something to inspire Dustin to be more Dustin-y, I guess. That actor, by the way, is 20 now. At any rate, I'm looking forward to the last season of it. I think it's going to be great. And the other thing that I was really psyched on, they always throw these little Easter eggs in there, was Hopper facing off against one of the Demogorgons still in Russia. I don't know, I guess it's because it was like supposed to be prisoners and almost like a Colosseum sort of scenario, but he picks up a sword, and I remember watching it with my wife and saying, why is there a fucking sword there? And it turns out that it's the actual Conan the Barbarian sword, like the same prop, the same one. And that's the thing about the Duffer Brothers in this series is like you're either going to be really stoked on that or just roll your eyes. Like, okay, we get it. It was the 80s. I thought it was rad. You know, just kind of like the E.T. references. Like, they're not very subtle a lot of the time, but I enjoy it for what it is. So, good stuff. Good stuff. You know, brought to mind a lot of like Hellraiser and Wes Craven kind of vibes, which I'm not mad at all. So we'll see what happens with the next season in a couple years. Those kids have grown up very quickly. I think the kind of like difference, you know, with the way they looked the last season and this one is kind of jarring. And I read it online somewhere that they're gonna do more of a time jump. So maybe it'll be 1988 and like a bunch of them are into like straight edge youth crew stuff and you know, moshing demigorgons. I'm hoping. Moshing with padlocks in the Upside Down. Oh, and one other thing. I know I'm just kind of rambling here, but what else do you expect from me? The character who played Vecna is actually legit like a metal dude, at least sort of. I read an interview with him where he said to get into character and be inspired, he was listening to tons of, his words, a sketchy black metal band called Revenge. I couldn't help but think, wow, this guy's like a 2017 era YouTuber. Was Vecna hanging up like silk tapestries of Conqueror and Revenge in the Upside Down, you know? Anyways, I thought that was kind of cool. Could make better choices than listening to friggin' Revenge, but that's just my own gatekeepy tastes, you know? Alright, so, enough about that nerd stuff, onto this other nerd stuff. So, I went home last month. Let's see, it was almost a total month ago. Oh, before I get ahead of myself, I should mention what we're listening to. This is a compilation, a mixtape, made by Simon from Explosive Action. Great channel, if you aren't familiar. Australian guy. We got like an evil kangaroo on it. This is all Australian bands, including, I won't list all of them off because it's got a bunch of songs on it, but the Australian Misery, Innsmouth, who I really enjoy, Nazgul, Ruins, Bremelin, Neuropath. Yeah, a lot of Intense Hammer Rage. Always love that band name. Great comp. Taped by Simon there. Good stuff. A couple of us got these. It's just a friend sharing their music. Gotta love that. Thank you, Simon. You're awesome. Alright, so I went home for a couple of gigs in Syracuse. This is like a fest. I think it was a couple of tours that kind of converged. This is the poster. We got Exodus, Municipal Waste, Voivod, Integrity, Carnivore AD, Extinction AD, Bewitcher, and Savage Existence. And then, a few days later in Rochester, I found out this was going on when I had everything booked, and I was like, oh, I gotta fly out the next day, but whatever. You know, I'll get zero sleep because the Accused AD were playing. And if you know me and you know this channel, you know that I love the Accused. With Deceased, Overdose, 2 local openers, Necrostalker and Leaking Head. This was drawn by my buddy James, who sang for Bloodwolf and Rotten UK. Great artist. Great Martha. That's a good Martha right there. So, I went to both of these and I did a bunch of shopping along the way. It was a solo trip, sans the family. Unfortunately, my wife had too much going on with work to come along, so I did some good hangs, caught up with some old friends, saw family. Overall, a really, really great visit. The first place that I went record shopping at was a place called Books and Memories. Or is it Books and Melodies? Books and Melodies in East Syracuse, which I used to go there when I lived on that side of town. It was down the street from my house when I lived in Syracuse, like 05, 06. And it was a real mess when I used to go there. It was a great place for digging because I would just be bored. At this time in my life, I didn't do much. Like, I delivered food like 4 or 5 days a week, delivered burritos for a restaurant called Alto Cinco. I was straight edge at the time, so I would just go skate, and on my days off and like in the early afternoon, I'd just go paw through this place. And it was a lot of stuff that I had no interest in. Your kind of typical old school record store where you'd thumbed through like a bazillion Joan Baez LPs before maybe finding something good. And I think the entire time I was there, I found Gravedigger Heavy Metal Breakdown, Anthrax Among the Living, and like a Creedence Clearwater Revival best of or something like that, or live record. And they were all in really good shape, but that was after like digging for hours. At some point, this place remodeled and kind of organized their stuff and started selling better stuff. I don't know if they bought collections or what, but in addition to LPs, they have a lot of books. It's a really cool store. And I got a couple of pretty good scores there. Nothing too crazy. But, original pressing of the third Tankard LP. The morning after. Noise. Great album. It's kind of funny because I saw Municipal Waste a few days after picking this up, and listening to this when I got home, I was like, man, these guys had a big... I mean, obviously they had a big influence on Municipal Waste. Like, that band's about partying and stuff like that, and this was kind of the OG version of that, but music-wise, I didn't ever quite realize, like, they're kind of like... The tight, fast, kind of bouncy thrash riffing they have kind of really reminds me of Municipal Waste. And they also start messing around with other styles of music on this one a little bit. I feel like they had a couple... Because I bought a best of by them maybe 6 months ago or something, and I was like, oh, there's a song on this. It's almost like kind of doomy, but it's like tongue-in-cheek, and I feel like they've done that a lot. I haven't listened to their entire discography or anything. I just have this and a best of compilation. And of course I listened to Chemical Invasion a lot when I was younger, but the song, I think it's Try Again on this, is almost kind of like a punk oi kind of thing. That was pretty good. I believe it's that one, the last song on the first side. But other than that, it's straightforward German beer thrash, you know? The Teutonic band that didn't take themselves too seriously. You know the deal. But yeah, cool to get an original copy of that. And what else did I get at that place? A couple of tapes. Horrible Earth. This is Tim Morse from AC's newer band. Recent band. Whoop. Pretty good. Death grind kind of stuff. Nothing that really stood out that much to me, but it's pretty heavy, you know, quick grindcore songs with like death metal production and vocals. This is Templar, a Caligari band. Kind of very much in the style of a lot of like Caligari acts. A lot of the bands that they like to sign, it's kind of not really specifically one genre of extreme metal. There's elements of thrash, black, and death metal. Kind of reminds me of some other stuff on that label, like Boya and some other stuff along those lines. There's a very much like kind of like free or mid 80s kind of spirit of early black metal, but also thrash and maybe a little bit of death metal in there. It's kind of sloppy. It's fun. And I think that's all that I got at Books and Melodies, if I'm not mistaken. Then I went to Soundgarden, which is a long-running Syracuse record store. They've been around since, God, I want to say like the mid-90s or late 90s. Still going strong. Those of you who used to watch Count Blaggerith, Sean used to go there a lot and buy stuff there. And they've really gotten great. I mean, they always had a good metal selection for CDs, even in an era where not a lot of people were buying CDs. And they have a lot of really good prices. They have a lot of good like used buy one get one deals, and they have a lot of vinyl, but like a lot of modern record stores, there's not a lot of secondhand stuff or like, you know, OG press bangers or anything like that. It's a lot of represses, which is fine. I picked up a few. I got this Prophecy of Doom LP repress. Acknowledge the Confusion Master. Probably the heaviest of all the OG like stenchcore crust bands that were on Peaceville from England in the late 80s, early 90s. You know, this is really almost just straight up death metal. Certainly if you like Bolt Thrower, give these guys a spin if you haven't heard them. You know, kind of politically leaning, but very, very, very abrasive, very heavy, kind of mid-paced chuggy with some punk elements. Crust punk stuff. Definitely mandatory if you are looking to get into crust. And Strong Amedics influence, of course. And then 7 Seconds. I've been meaning to pick this up for a while. If you've been paying attention, if you follow hardcore, these guys have been touring with Negative Approach and the Circle Jerks. The shows look great. Like, I wish I could have made it out to at least one of them, but wasn't in the cards for me. I have seen 7 Seconds numerous times and Negative Approach a whole bunch of times, but I have never seen the Circle Jerks. This is like the classic 7 Seconds record. The Crew came out, I want to say 85 or so. 83. This is a really, really, really nice reissue on Trust Records. It comes with a booklet that is gorgeous. Kind of bound in the middle of the spine there. And the sound on this is great. I only had CD copies of this back in the day. And there was something about like the way it was mastered wasn't great. It sounded really flat and buried. This really brings that awesome, aggressive, catchy hardcore punk sound out with a little bit of melody. That's what 7 Seconds was known for. They had I never realized it at the time, but they did have like kind of a strong Oi influence with their mid-pace parts, almost like their breakdowns and stuff. There's a few kind of cringy moments that I find endearing on this. Like, namely, there's like a rappy part on it that's like not really good. Like, you know, it sounds like Kevin Seconds trying to do his version of like, I don't know, like Sugar Hill Gang or something like that. And then there's like the chorus in Not Just Boys Fun, which it's a great song about like, you know, gender equality and hardcore. However, you could tell the guys singing the chorus are guys, and they're just trying to sing more high pitched so they sound like AFAB women, which is kind of weird. But other than that, songs on this are great. My go-to favorite 7 Second stuff is the CD that's called Old School. That's when they're a 3-piece, and it's just perfectly recorded, raw, super fast, super pissed. I recommend that one over this one, but this one is still great. They did a great job reissuing this. And the label that reissued this is going to be reissuing SSD Kids Will Have Their Say, which I'm very excited about. And if you're into early 80s hardcore, you know that label, or that album's been out of print, and finally the members of the band negotiated something with Trust Records, and that's finally happening, and I can't even believe it. Also at Soundgarden, I picked up the new Suppression, Sorrow of Soul Through Flesh. This is a Chilean death metal band featuring the bass player from Ripper, who I don't know if he left Ripper completely or he's just doing this as well. Pablo Cortez. He plays a fretless bass, and if you like sort of progressive death metal from the 90s, this is definitely up your alley. Certainly, like Beneath the Remains, Sepultura, maybe the second and third Morbid Angel records, and Testimony era Pestilence. It's got that really great present jazzy bass that's like super noodly, and everything's just super well written and memorable and awesome. Great deep growled vocals that are somewhat understandable. I have so much stuff to talk about. It's tough to like navigate my piles here. Navigating my piles sounds gross. Fall Silent, new Fall Silent. This band was from Reno. You Knew I Was Poison. This is like a reunion record. Fall Silent had a weird place in 90s hardcore. They weren't part of the whole power violence thing, but they were friendly with that crew of bands and people. I think one of the guys from Spaz, probably Max, was like wearing one of their shirts on one of their records. They kind of appealed to a lot of metalcore people, but they didn't have that like, hey, here's a million breakdowns so you can beat the shit out of each other kind of thing. They almost were doing crossover during a time before Municipal Waste came out, where it wasn't really cool to do it, but it wasn't straight up like DRI or Cryptic Slaughter. It was almost kind of technical and death metal at times. It did have like hard parts and breakdowns, but a lot of it was fast. And it was fast during a time where like fast wasn't as popular, you know, like blazing fast, kind of metallic hardcore stuff. And this is a great return to form. Super thrashy, you know, technical but not masturbatory. You know, it's good. It's not wanky. A lot of the riffs are very complex. There is a significant, for the slow parts, there's a significant kind of death metal influence, and for the fast parts, There's a significant thrash metal influence. There's lots of fast hardcore in the mix as well. The vocalist is like kind of snotty and yelly, kind of sounding almost like the hybrid of Ray of Today and Tony Erba. It's awesome. It's great hardcore stuff from Reno. Invocator, Weave the Apocalypse. I got excited when I saw this and forgot that I had a Russian boot of it. And I'm always down for upgrading and buying the real version of anything, but I forgot that this second Invocator record is not like their debut and their demos. Their debut and their demos are very straight up, like ripping, brutal, death thrash kind of stuff. This is a little bit more groove metal. You know, I like it better than Pantera or the second Exhorder record, but it's certainly not the same animal, and I just somehow kind of forgot that. I think I just saw this and was like, Seagrave! Seagrave! I got excited over the cover art. It's a reissue that came out on Hammerheart. Nice slip cover. It does have a bonus disc of live stuff and some promos, which just makes it worth the price for me. And going back and listening to it, it's pretty cool. It's just most of that kind of like groove thrash stuff isn't really my thing. Cianide, Divide and Conquer. Picked that up used. Great. It's the 2000 Cianide record. It's not the first record they started playing like faster on after their doomy first couple of albums. It's the second one. But awesome, like really heavy, almost Celtic Frost guitar tone on this. Just classic meat and potatoes Chicago death metal. You know what's up with Cianide. I don't need to tell you. Varathron, Lament of the Gods. This is like 95 era Varathron. Still great. You know, not the classic records. Technically, I think this is an EP. Yeah, it's an EP from 95. It's also got a demo on it from 97. The Sarmucius Pagoris demo. Got a cover of Nuns Have No Fun. It sounds like Varathron. It's that great Hellenic. It sounds like Varathron. It's that great Hellenic black metal stuff that you, with a pinch of melody, that you have grown to love if you are a fan of black metal. Got this Hulder demos collection. I really like the full length that came out last year. I haven't heard that new EP yet. Very raw recording on this. Very necro, black metal stuff. Traditional second wave style black metal. Great songwriting though. Their cover of Into the Crypts of Rays is one of the better covers of that I've heard. Then we've got Aggressor, The Arrival. This is 2 Aggressor records on 2 CDs. Never Ending Destiny and Towards Beyond. Aggressor were a French thrash metal band that had a lot of like death metal kind of leanings, death and black metal kind of leanings from the late 80s into the early 90s. They're really awesome. I believe they were a pretty big influence on the second wave black metal stuff from Norway. Real feral, snarling thrash with almost kind of death metalish sort of vocals. Really, really heavy, great stuff. And I think that wraps it up for the Syracuse stuff. So those were the scores. The gig, which, let me grab that flyer again. Pure filth. My friend Brendan told me it was a guy from Florida that threw this together. It was a really interesting show. It was at a place called Sharky's that was in Liverpool, New York, which is a suburb of Syracuse. It was all outside. I'm going to post a few videos. I have a brief one of Voivod I'll throw up right here. There's this huge canopy and a huge stage. It was pretty well attended, I want to say. I mean, for Syracuse, I want to say there were probably, I don't know, like 300 or 400 people there, maybe 5. I'm not really the greatest with gauging crowd density. By the time Municipal Waste and Exodus played, it was pretty packed in front. But they had food there. You know, I had a bomb quesadilla. They had 2 bars, one inside, one outside. Pretty nice place. And it was a good day for it as well, because for some reason it was a moderately temperate kind of day. It was actually like 65 throughout the day, so everybody's like, you know, wearing their hoodies and stuff, very comfortable. And all the bands were pretty good. Extinction AD didn't really do much for me at the time. I didn't really get what they were doing. It was kind of a combination of like some thrash, but also some kind of like groovish, like hardcore kind of stuff from what I could tell. Bewitcher was awesome. I came in while they were playing, so I missed about half of their set, but great black thrash, Venom kind of stuff. Carnivore AD were interesting. I guess they have no original members from Carnivore. Apparently when they started, they had Louis Beto on drums. He's no longer playing with them. Their singer that plays bass was an original member of Sheer Terror, however, and they had the guitarist from the Crumbsuckers playing with them, which was cool. They sounded great. You know, they played all the hits. You know, I was a little concerned because there's a fair amount of sketch up there, and they didn't really attract that, which I'm thankful for. Integrity sounded perfect. You know, now it's just Dwid and randos playing with them, but I don't know if it's because they were playing in Syracuse and they knew where their bread was buttered in that regard. They played mostly stuff from their classic Victory records and Those Who Fear Tomorrow and all that, but they sounded perfect. They were very, very, very good, and I don't know how Dwid has been singing like that for so long and hasn't destroyed his voice, because certainly people like Barney Greenway and others have, you know, had to adapt to their vocal cords being destroyed over the years, and Dwid still sounds even more snarling and evil than he did back in the 90s. He sounded great. Fan favorites were probably Voivod. I mean, they were so good. They sounded perfect. They played a great combination of like new and old stuff. They looked like they were having so much fun up there. It was so cool. They had the best sound probably out of any of the bands, and were just great, having an awesome time. Like, closed with the song Voivod. I circle pitted. It was awesome. Then Municipal Waste. You know, I have conflicting thoughts about Municipal Waste. I loved them when they came out because they were a band playing thrash metal in the punk scene. And just to give you context, I mean, in 2001, there was a lot of like very serious heavy bands like Tragedy and Catharsis and all these bands playing in the DIY underground scene that were very political and everything, and that's great, but there was very little like kind of lightheartedness going on. And then around 2000 and 2001, there was a rebirth of like very fast, thrashy hardcore. Stuff that was like similar to like the Neos and DRI, and there was a big upswell of bands like Nine Shocks Terror and Tear It Up who were doing this fast, manic hardcore stuff. And it didn't take itself too seriously. And it kind of dovetailed with that there were a few bands that were experimenting with thrash metal that were younger, that were kind of merging thrash metal and hardcore again. And Municipal Waste weren't alone. They were one of the best to do it, but there was also Bones Brigade from Boston, who were also great. There was Cross-Examination from, I can't remember, St. Louis. There was DFA from Canada. There was a handful of bands. Holier Than Thou from California. So it was like not like a popular thing to do this modern crossover stuff. And out of all of them, Toxic Holocaust was also kind of that, but they were leaning more in a direction of, you know, black thrash or something, I guess, or like Teutonic stuff, more or less. All that stuff was kind of happening between like 99 and 2003. And out of all that, Municipal Waste were the ones that got huge, kind of crossed over into the metal scene, the actual metal scene, got signed to Earache, you know, if you didn't know the story there. And over time, I just kind of like fell out of favor. They kind of fell out of favor with me. Not exactly sure why. I think it's because at that time I was still in my 20s when they were like getting really, really huge, and especially in the punk scene, you saw the effects of their influence and how like all these kids with flipped up hats and trying to do keg stands at shows. Like, it was just getting kind of silly, you know? I remember an after show my band Mechanable played in Worcester, where them and Toxic Holocaust and Dysphere played this after show. Dysphere and Toxic Holocaust played. Municipal Waste were rumored to play but didn't. And there are all these kids with like the whole outfit, you know, the whole uniform, the hat, the vest, and bandanas and stuff that were trying to do keg stands, but like couldn't hang, and like one like sorority looking girl completely just destroyed them and like did a fully executed keg stand while these dudes are like puking and stuff. It was just funny. Just the whole wacky thrash thing, I think, like, got old for a lot of people, but I could never dispute the fact that Municipal Waste were a really good band. Even if you think their lyrics are really silly or annoying or don't like their whole general, their whole aesthetic, their whole approach, you can't deny the fact that those guys write some serious riffs, they can play their asses off, and I forgot how fucking good they were live. They played this and dismantled the place. They were on point, great song, like between song banter and stuff like that. And I remembered like Waste 'Em All and everything up to the Art of Partying. Pretty awesome stuff. Like really, really fun shit. So let's see, where is it? I actually went out and bought their new one because I was so impressed with their set, and I heard this was going to be pretty good, and it's great. This is Electrified Brain. It's their new album out on Nuclear Blast. It was produced by Arthur Riddick. Arthur Rizek. That guy that produces everything. It sounds awesome. It's got great riffs. There's a lot more like traditional heavy metal kind of weaving its way in, but they still kind of maintain like that punk edge on a few songs. I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like Hang the Pope. They wear their influences on their sleeves. You know, Nuclear Assault, Exodus, The Accused. Blaine from The Accused does a guest part on this, on one of the songs on this, as does Barney Greenway. Every song has its own identity, which is a big thing with me. You know, all the songs sound different. They kind of veer in and out of, like, more hardcore-leaning stuff that's still very much thrash metal, and stuff that's like, I'm like, oh, wow, is that... It sounds like Accept, you know, or something like that. Very, very fun, well-written stuff. I'm back on board with Municipal Waste. What can I say? I don't give a fuck. Judge me if you will. Exodus were awesome. Exodus played a ton of stuff off of Bonded by Blood. You know, all the Zetro era stuff. They didn't play too much new stuff from the newer Zetro records. I don't know if they played anything with that other dude, Rob Dukes. All their classic stuff was well represented. They played for a long time, but sounded amazing. Same thing when I saw them on the Bay Strikes Back tour with Testament. They were really good, and it kind of inspired me. Like I have all of the music from Bonded by Blood grafted into my brain. I love that record, of course. It's a thrash metal classic, but I kind of got the urge to like listen to their last couple of records with Zetro before they took a long hiatus. Impact is Imminent. I bought these right when I came back, and Force of Habit, which I bought when it came out and was very disappointed by. Both these records are good as hell, in my opinion. They're riff bouquets. They're very long. Like, they have very, very, very long songs on these, where they just keep pounding you with riff after heavy-ass riff. Force of Habit is a little bit bloated. You know, I don't know if there's a need for an Elton John cover and an Elvis Costello cover. That being said, this is heavy as hell. I mean, as far as guitar tone and just the impact of the riffs and stuff like that, I think this is their heaviest record. It does lean into the groove thing a little bit, the post-thrash living under the shadow of the Black Album kind of deal, but it's very much Exodus still. Zetro sounds great on it. I like this album. This and Independent by Sacred Reich I've been jamming. You know, just this need for a little post-Black Album, post-thrash stuff has been kind of filled recently by me. So then I headed over to Rochester, stayed at a really, really nice hotel, and in a really nice part of town. It had been, I want to say, hadn't been to Rochester in like 16 years or something like that. So it was cool to go back. A lot of stuff I didn't recognize there. I did live there for about a year in the late 90s. Cool town. I always kind of forget like how kind of unique that town is. They have a couple of really, really good record stores that have been around forever, one of which is the Record Archive, which I went to. That's the place where Dan Lilker works. Did not see him there, although he was at the Syracuse gig. And I spent a lot of time there. It's one of those big, like, cavernous kind of record stores, kind of dusty. They had tons of stuff other than vinyl and CDs and everything. They had, like, shirts and toys, almost like an indie Newberry Comics. Kind of reminds me a lot of the Newberry Comics in Norwood. If you're from New England, you know what I'm talking about. But like with the whole reissue thing, there was a lot of records I'm like, I could get this, but I could get it anywhere. This reissue on vinyl, I want to find rando weird stuff. So I bought mostly CDs with a few tapes. A few things I was like, I gotta check that off the list. Macabre Dahmer. This is, 2000 this Macabre record came out. If you don't know Macabre, it's tight, insanely tight, vicious death metal. It's tongue firmly implanted in cheek. A lot of references, clearly, to serial killers and that sort of thing. This is an entire concept record about Jeffrey Dahmer's life. At a certain point, the silliness of it, like, gets to be a bit much. Because all the songs are kind of based on other, like, catchy songs from back in the day. Do the Dahmer, you know, it's like almost like a surf kind of deal. It's very goofy, but also incredibly morose and weird. But, man, yeah, this band could certainly play their asses off. I like this record. I'm more of a Sinister Slaughter, Gloom kind of dude when it comes to them, but I definitely wanted to own this. Immortal Terror. Anything like this, I'm like, okay, cool. I've been wanting to hear this. A historical band. This is a Buffalo grindcore band that were around like 89, 90. I believe a member or two went on to the lineup of Anthropic, and I think they went on to do a lot of other bands as well. I didn't research this thoroughly enough, unfortunately, before I grabbed this, but it's live at the Sky Room, which was like one of the venues for Buffalo death metal back in the day. Then some demos and stuff, and it's just great, blown out kind of death metal-y grindcore stuff. Good stuff. I haven't even spun this yet. I bought so much stuff. Well, it's Exciter. This is Better Live Than Dead. It's recorded in 91, so it's got like all the stuff covered that Exciter did in the 80s from various albums. But I'll get back to you on how that sounds. Go! Exclamation point for the throat. I always heard about this band like in the early 2000s. Kind of in that thrash era that I was talking about, the fast hardcore era. A friend of mine had a zipper hoodie of this that was like a G exclamation point FTT. And I was like, what? I always gave him a hard time. I was like, what the hell is that? But anyway, we got 24 songs on this. It's hardcore. It's more like positive kind of hardcore stuff. Not too dissimilar, like a more posy tear it up is how I would describe this. They were from Philly. Youth Enrage. Heaka. 625 thrashcore. Kind of weird, disjointed, spazzy, fast Japanese hardcore stuff. I heard these guys initially from a dude that I met in Scotland. And like a lot of stuff out of Japan, there's nothing quite like it. It's kind of hard to describe. But it is fast and aggressive and kind of, like I said, kind of like herky-jerky and weird and jangly. Altar, and God created Satan to blame for his mistakes. Great death metal from the Netherlands. Big influence from Deicide on this. You know, just almost that kind of drumming style or that velocity of the music where the drums are almost going faster than the guitars. It sounds like the music's like trying to keep up with itself. Very, very aggressive, fast death metal. You might think that this is like more of a war metal or bestial kind of thing just from the cover art. You know, you got red logo, white cover art. Might think it sounds like Blasphemy or something. Either that or maybe it's like early brutal stuff like Internal Bleeding kind of looked like that aesthetically, but it's neither. It sounds like Deicide, which, you know, might be the best out of all those styles, although I love me some Internal Bleeding. This is a band that, like, perennially, like, every couple of years, I'm like, was that good? I need to listen to them again, because, like, I think it might be good, but I don't remember. Was I disappointed last time I tried to check this out 10 years ago? I used to see their ads in Thrasher. One of those bands for me was, like, King Horse, and, like, I definitely love King Horse. But Blitzbeer live. Pusshead artwork there. Band from New York that were like kind of a heavy rock band. like they're kind of all over the place on this. City Boy, the first song, is definitely like a Motorhead kind of jam, you know, like fast, punishing, like punky rock and roll metal stuff. But they have some other songs on this that are like leaning more towards like LA sleaze rock style, which I try to appreciate that stuff, but it doesn't really do much for me. But there's some bangers on this. They later had this is a live record. It sounds awesome. Like in terms of like live sound and the recording, it's great. They had another record that came out a year or two later called Blitzbeer Saves, and I don't know if that was the same style or not. I don't know. And then Depeche Mode, Violator. Actually, this I picked up in Syracuse. Yeah, I mean mandatory 80s synth pop. You know, it's Depeche Mode, Personal Jesus. What else do you need to know? So that's it for my scores. But this gig, ooh, buddy, this gig was killer. The Accused, Deceased, Overdose, Local Openers, Necrostalker, and Leaking Head. This was at a place called the Photo City Music Hall, a newer venue in Rochester. Kind of a smaller club, but intimate, super cool. It's like in a plaza. It was a great kind of atmosphere there. Dark, not really grimy or dirty, but kind of, you know, very dimly lit. Huge bar. They had Mickey's Big Mouths, which I took advantage of. Definitely didn't feel great driving to the airport the next day. But yeah, huge beer selection. Everybody was very, very cool and professional that worked there. And the sound was excellent too. I don't remember too much about the openers, I hate to say. I showed up halfway through the first one. I will check them out, though, at some point. I like the name Leaking Head a lot. Overdose were incredible. If you don't know Overdose, New York band, Reed, formerly of Speedwolf, chief songwriter. It's definite Motorhead worship, but they do it better than pretty much anyone else. Possibly even Motorhead towards the end of their career. I know that's blasphemous to say, but they capture that that golden era of Fast Eddie and Filthy Animal Taylor three-piece kind of stuff really well. They know that it's not all about the fast stuff that in that style. It's also about kind of the slow, rocking, kind of desperate sounding songs like Iron Horse that made Motorhead great. They sounded incredible. They were so good. I can't recommend their records enough. They have 2 out of print 7-inch singles and a full length that are awesome. The Accused were everything I'd hoped they'd be. I don't usually go out of my way to talk to people from bands that I love, especially like old bands and everything. Like I'm always been kind of like stubbornly anti-idolatry in that sense. But Blaine was sitting by himself at the picnic tables outside, and I didn't really know anybody there. My friend James, who drew the flyer, hadn't shown up yet, and I hadn't been in Rochester since like I said, 2004 or 5 or something. So I was bored. You know, I was having my first beer, and I just randomly, very politely introduced myself to Blaine, and he couldn't have been nicer. We talked a little bit about his YouTube channel where he does all like kind of cocktail stuff, which is really, really cool. I'll leave a link for it. It sucks. He has like less than 500 subs, and it's super fun. I know that he owned a burger bar that had to close down like right after he went back from tour, which is a huge bummer. I think that's where he shot his YouTube channel too, so I don't know exactly what's going on with that, but they were great. I mean, it's Blaine with none of the original members. That's thus the Accused AD. It's kind of a Venom Inc. kind of situation, but they killed it. They were so good. They did an entire set of the first album, Return of Martha Splatterhead, with some additional, you know, a few extra songs from some of the other albums, and they just were incredible. They were incredible. You know, I was so happy. Deceased, I'd seen them before. I was just kind of like hanging out like at the back of the club and outside a lot of the time that they were playing, but they sounded perfect. They did Fearless Undead Machines set, which was really, really great too. So it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. So yeah, great to be back out there experiencing live music once again. That's about it. I had a couple of great record shopping trips. Well, specifically one with my better half in Raleigh that I'll be talking about next. I went to a place called the Poorhouse, which is a record store and bar. Got a few things there, and went to the always powerful, always dangerous on the wallet Sorry State Records in Raleigh, which is potentially hazardous every time I step in there, but I always get something really, really cool. So I'm going to talk about that next. That's it for now. That is enough blabbing. Let's stop this. Follow me on social media. Don't be a stranger. I like to talk. I like discourse. Let's talk about tunes. Talk about Stranger Things. I'm here for you. Have a good one.